In this video, we're going to be filling in a handy-dandy chart that's got all of the trig values for the most commonly seen angles that we've got in trig. So, let's roll. We're going to begin by looking at 0 to 90, 0, 30, 45, 60, 90. We're going to use sine first. Now, when we do that, we can use our little hand trick and go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, that means that the sine of 0 must be 0. Sine of 30 or 1/6 pi is going to be 1/2. The sine of 45 degrees or pi over 4 is going to be the square root of 2 over 2. 60 is going to be the square root of 3 over 2, and then the square root of 4 over 2, which is 2 over 2, which is 1. When I do cosine of theta for those same angles, I just go the opposite direction. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, starting at 90 and working back. So the cosine of 90 must be 1. 60 is 1/2. Square root of 2 over 2 here. Square root of 3 over 2 over here. And 1 right there. Now, when I fill in the tangent values for those same important and special angles, I can simply take the sine over the cosine. So we learned in the past, tangent is equal to sine over cosine. So 0 over 1 is 0. 1/2 divided by the square root of 3 over 2, multiplied by the reciprocal. 2's cancel. I get 1 over the square root of 3. Simplify that to the square root of 3 over 3. Sine over cosine here, well, sine over cosine, they're the same thing. So when you divide them, you get 1. Tangent of 45 is 1. And the tangent of 60, well, this divided by this ends up as just the square root of 3. The last one, when I take sine over cosine, the tangent of 90 degrees will be 1 divided by 0. Well, that doesn't work. That's undefined. Now, as we fill in the rest of our table, I want to pick out some specific angles and work with them in a pattern. Now, another thing I want you to remember, we learned in a previous lesson, in each quadrant, the signs of my trig functions are different. The first quadrant, they're all positive. Second quadrant, the sine is positive. Third quadrant is tangent, and fourth quadrant is cosine. Keeping that in mind, we're going to move to some angles in the second quadrant now. We're going to start with the angles that have a reference angle of 45 degrees. So, 45 degrees is here. Reference angle 45 degrees would match up with this guy right here, 135 degrees. You grab 135 degrees, it ends up right about here in the second quadrant. It's got a reference angle of 45 degrees. So it's going to have the same values. So I can transfer these values over here. Square root of 2 over 2, square root of 2 over 2, and 1. Now the thing that I have to check on then is the sign of those particular values. So since I'm in the second quadrant, sine is positive in the second quadrant. That means the other two, cosine and tangent, must be negative. Well, the next one I'll transfer over is my 30 degrees measurements. Well, of these, it has a reference angle of 30. 150 is 30 short of 180, so 150 and 30 are going to match up. So 150 and 30 are going to match up, which means I can put 1/2, square root of 3 over 2, and square root of 3 over 3 in these boxes. And again, since I'm in the second quadrant, sine is positive, cosine and tangent will be negative. The next one we'll look at is 120 degrees. 120 degrees happens to match up with 60 because it has a reference angle of 60 degrees. So I must be able to put those same values. Square root of 3 over 2, 1/2, and the square root of 3. And again, second quadrant, sine is positive, cosine, tangent, you are both negative. Color coded there too. Now, moving on to the third quadrant, we'll come back from 180 in just a minute. Moving on to the third quadrant, 225 is going to be the angle that matches up with a 45 degree reference angle. So I can copy the same values as 45 into these boxes. And then since I'm in the third quadrant now, 225 ends up in the third quadrant. T for tangent, that's the positive trig value here. So that means sine is negative, cosine is negative, and tangent would be positive. Make sure that shows up as negative. There we go. Now, how about the next 30 degree reference angle? So 30 goes to 150. Well, the next angle with a reference angle of 30 is going to be 210 because it's 30 degrees past 180. So again, these angles, 1/2, square root of 3 over 2, etc., are going to jump down here. 1/2, square root of 3 over 2, and the square root of 3 over 3. And we're in the third quadrant, so I've got negative sine, negative cosine, positive tangent. 240 has a reference angle of 60 because it's 60 beyond 180. So we're going to use these values, square root of 3 over 2, 1/2, and square root of 3. And And again, sine is negative, cosine is negative, tangent is positive because we're in the third quadrant. Our fourth and final quadrant, we're going to jump over here. Starting with the 45-degree reference angle number, that's 315 degrees. That's 45 degrees short of 360. So we're going to have, once again, square root of 2 over 2, square root of 2 over 2, and 1. Fourth quadrant now. All seniors too cool. C for cosine is the positive expression in the fourth quadrant. So sine is negative, cosine is positive, tangent is negative. Let's transfer 210, these numbers. This is the 30-degree reference angle. Well, 330 is 30 short of 360, so that will have the same reference angle, and thus the same values. 1/2, square root of 3 over 2, and square root of 3 over 3. Sine is negative, tangent is negative, cosine is positive. We're in the fourth quadrant. And the last one of these, with a reference angle issue, we've got 300 degrees matches with 240, because 300 is 60 short of 360. So we're going to have square root of 3 over 2, 1/2, square root of 3, negative sine, positive cosine, negative tangent. So that takes care of all of our reference angles. The last ones we have to fill in our table are the quadrantal angles of 90, 180, 270, 360. So for those, 90 we're able to just use our hand trick and figure, okay, 90 with zeros and ones, etc. Over here, 180, 270, 360. Well, in that case, I want you to think about the unit circle. Okay? So I've got this point right here on a unit circle, that'd be 1, 0. This point would be 0, 1. This point over here would be negative 1, 0. And this point would be 0, negative 1. So again, I'm thinking about the x and the y. So as I get to 90 degrees up here, the coordinate through which I would pass in the unit circle would be 0, 1. 0 being the x value, 1 being the y value. Sine is equal to y value, which is why it was 1. Cosine is equal to x value, which is why it was 0. Now when I get to 180 degrees, or pi radians, now the point on the unit circle that I'm going through is over here. That would be at negative 1 for x, 0 for y. So if that's the case, negative 1 for x, that means cosine is going to equal negative 1. 0 for y, that means sine is going to equal 0. Tangent is sine over cosine. 0 divided by negative 1 is going to be 0. Now I have that just for the sake of the spacing in the table. I've got 180 degrees again, so we can fill it in as 0, negative 1, 0. And then we'll jump down to 270 degrees. So for this one, I start here, rotate all the way down to 270, now straight down. The point on the unit circle through which I'm passing now is 0, negative 1. X is 0, that means cosine is 0. Y is negative 1, so sine is negative 1. Tangent, if I'm trying to divide by 0, it's not going to work, so tangent there is going to be undefined once again. And when I get back to 360 degrees, or 2 pi radians, that's going to be the same as 0. So we're going to have 0 for sine, 1 for cosine, and 0 for my tangent. Now, you could have all this memorized. There's a lot of stuff to memorize. But again, I think if you remember the hand trick, a lot of this can still make sense. So if I need to know, what is the cosine of 3/4 pi? Well, like 3/4 pi, I'm thinking that's 3/4 of a whole pi, so that's about 135 degrees, because that's 3/4 of 180. So then I just take my hand, I just turn it around. So I still have a reference angle of 45. So whatever the value was for 45, 0, 1, 2, it's going to be the square root of 2 over 2, I remember that. And then I just have to think about, okay, well, which quadrant am I in? I'm in the second quadrant where sine is positive, so that must be in the sine of 3/4 pi is square root of 2 over 2. So the hand trick can still help you out here. If you're good with thinking about reference angles in your head, and you remember that all seniors are too cool, and that's what decides the sign of the trig function in each quadrant.